This week with us, Christopher Dickey of Newsweek and the Daily Beast, and Claude Guibal of Radio France. We have with us Michael Kirtley, independent documentary filmmaker and reporter, and Paul Taylor of the Reuters news agency. Who says the UN never does anything? Peacekeepers taking their armored vehicles to the streets of the eastern Congo city of Goma, this after using helicopter gunships to protect North Kivu's capital from rebels of the M23 movement. Now, those blue helmets redeployed from their hunt further north for Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army. It's the latest in a long list of flare-ups in the mineral-rich region these past 16 years, with this time some 100,000 displaced, 30,000 pouring across the border into Uganda. Rwanda emphatically denies it's backing the rebellion, but a UN report leaked by Kinshasa squarely blames, among others, Paul Kagame's defense minister. Now, on Thursday, Congo, Rwanda, and neighboring states signed a deal to bury the hatchet and set up a neutral international military force to eliminate armed rebels. Michael Kirtley, UN bashing, a safe sport that we often see on this very show. In this case, the United Nations is sort of in this role where it's them or no one.
Well, keep in mind they are taking a backup role to the Congolese armed forces, and I think that in a certain sense you have a position right now where the UN has come out, declaring almost semi-officially that the Rwandans are behind the M23 and the other groups that are fighting against the armed forces in the Congo. So I think that it's a pretty logical step for them to take that backup role. On the other hand, this situation you talk about different agreements that might be or might not be made. I don't see that happening in the near future. I see that the Rwandans have too much vested interest to maintain a loyal dissidence, let's say, inside of Kivu province, for them to accept over the long term that there be too much integration into the military. Basically, what's going on right now is a mutiny that has turned into an opposition to the armed forces, and that mutiny began back in April. And what we're going to see in the near future is some sort of negotiation, but the Rwandans want to maintain sort of an itch in the back of the Congolese.
The Rwandans who it's been reported they're supposed to be keeping the former warlord Laurent Nkunda under house arrest, and that apparently he's been seen out and about in the streets of Kigali. A lot of criticism has been leveled these past couple of weeks at most notably the United States, saying they let Rwanda off too lightly when it comes to what's going on in eastern Congo.
You know, a few weeks ago I was interviewing Antonio Guterres, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and we were talking about different troubled places in the world, and certainly this is one of the most troubled, with the most bloodshed, the most people displaced, and he just looked at me and said, and nobody cares. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares. Nobody's paying any real attention. Mali. People care about Mali more. You have Laurent Fabius, the foreign minister of France, talking about the possibility of sending troops into Mali. Nobody's talking about sending European troops, certainly, into Congo. So basically, these UN people, as you pointed out, the UN forces there, they're the last hope of order in an environment which is deeply disordered and where every party in the immediate area has its own interests, its own players, and it's not going to give them up.
Claude Guibal, we can confirm this because we know that Congo has overtaken France as the world's #1 francophone country. And yet, the coverage of foreign news from Africa the past couple of weeks, as Christopher was saying, it's been about Mali, not at all about what's going on.
Yeah, but in Mali, France has a big interest because of AQMI, because of the presence of Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb.
But both Rwanda and Congo are French-speaking countries.
French-speaking countries, of course. But when it comes to Congo, I'm quite amazed. I'm more Middle East specialist, but I'm quite amazed to see that in France we don't pay that much attention on Central Africa, issues. Ask any average French person about what's going on in Congo. I'm not sure people can even say what is M23, movement.
I'm sure they can't.
I can almost guarantee that.
I think France had its fingers badly burned in Central Africa 20 years ago with the Rwandan genocide, where clearly they had a role that was that's has never been properly looked into in France, in my view. It has been looked into to some extent in Belgium, the former colonial power in Congo and in that whole region, which was where journalists have been keen to incriminate France. But the fact that these are French speakers is not going to make France turn into the policeman of Central Africa again.
Well, and states do what they can do. I mean, they go to war in Libya because they think they can do something in Libya and achieve something. They may go to war in Mali with the same idea. I don't think they have any illusions that they can achieve anything in Congo.
In the words of Jim Baker, they don't have a dog in that fight.
All right, well, we'll hope that it stays on the radar for at least for, especially when you look at the sheer size of the problem at this point. You could call the next segment The World Next Week. After Barclays' Bob Diamond, it's HSBC's Stuart Gulliver that you're going to be hearing from. He'll be apologizing next Tuesday in front of a U.S. Senate committee. It won't be about the LIBOR interest rate fixing scandal that's yet to hit Britain's biggest bank. That's over at Barclays for now. But it's about money laundering that took place at the bank between 2004 and 2010. Money laundering that took place under his predecessor's watch, Stephen Green. Green, who, by the way, happens to be the trade minister right now in the government of David Cameron. Paul Taylor, this is a story that the Reuters News Agency has been working on and quite a lot.
Indeed, and it's at the moment all the dirt is coming out of the closets about the banks. It's Basher Banker Week. Next week, clearly,
is it acceptable when the boss says, "I didn't know, weren't aware that there was money laundering going on our beat"?
Sounds a bit like the prefect in Casablanca being shocked to find there's gambling going on in his establishment. They ought to know, and they ought to spend the money and the time and the effort on compliance to make sure that they are obeying the rules. But clearly, in an internal memo which was reported today, he said that they've doubled their spend from $200 million to $400 million on compliance with regulation. But the question is, did the banks look the other way because it was good business, and how far up the food chain did that go?
But I have a question. You say $200 to $400 million on regulation.
Yeah.
That's nice, but that's him internally.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that money be spent from an outside regulator and not from inside the bank? Shouldn't it be an outsider looking into how the bank works?
You should have both, of course. You should have both. The point is that the bank has a duty, has a legal responsibility to make sure that it is applying the regulations and respecting them, and that is something which requires the bank to spend money, hire staff, have internal audit procedures, and have lots of checks and balances, and the possibility for people inside to blow the whistle on wrongdoing. And in a lot of banks, that was clearly not encouraged, and
not the case.
I mean, since the Patriot Act, there's been the necessity under the Bank Secrecy Act to have a compliance division that handles all of this type of thing. And essentially, there's an investigative and there's also a reporting element that's compelled. The problem with these banks is that they don't want to spend the money to do that.
And we're talking...
They don't want to do it at all, as a matter of fact.
Well, they don't want to hurt their clients either, keeping in mind that a lot of this money, the problem is you've got trillions of dollars floating around the world.
In this case, we're talking about clients who were perhaps drug dealers and Islamist extremists even, they're saying.
Well, a lot of the work of HSBC out of Miami, for example, takes place with South America and Mexico. And some of the work goes with the Cambias, the Casio de Cambias in Mexico, which is a well-known money launderer of drug money. But HSBC doesn't care. I don't think the banks care until they're forced to care.
Until they're caught.
Yes.
Christopher Dickey, when you were researching your book, Securing the City Inside America's Best Counterterror Force, the NYPD, the New York City Police, their headquarters are right next to the Brooklyn Bridge. Did any of the people you interviewed sometimes say to you, well, if we want to find Osama bin Laden and those jihadists, why don't we just go 15 blocks south to Wall Street and try to find the money trail?
Well, that's one thing that the NYPD doesn't do a lot of, but certainly the money trail is very important. I mean, that's something that the feds do. That's something the FBI does. It's something the Treasury Department does, and they do it with a vengeance, which is one of the reasons they turn up this information about HSBC. Ultimately, if you want to stop big terrorist operations, you stop big money from moving around. Unfortunately, most terrorist operations are not big, expensive operations. They're just ruthless.
And the problem is that money, you don't know where it's moving to. You could have money that could be moving out of Miami and then suddenly be in Hong Kong and then switch to Iran or then switch to Cuba. I mean, you can't, it's not necessarily money that goes directly out of the United States to these countries.
Final word on this. The New York Times predicts HSBC will probably weather the storm okay. We do not think there's a culture of money laundering at HSBC, one investor said. Management overlooked it, but will fix it. But LIBOR, the interest rate fixing scandal, that's different, he says. So follow that. We may be talking about that again in the very near future. Now, after David Cameron's jibe at the G20 summit about rolling out the red carpet to French investors who may feel the weight of overtaxation after the election of a socialist president in this country, François Hollande responding in kind on his first trip to London since that election.
I really enjoy humor, and especially British humor. So I was very happy when I saw there was a red carpet for me.
As for red carpets, there was one today for François only.
That red carpet line has gotten a lot of mileage for David Cameron.
Yeah, well, you know, the Brits love beating up on the French, and in the words of a former French president, David Cameron probably missed a good opportunity to shut up. But he couldn't resist having another go at the French. It always goes down well in the British media with the British public. You know, he was putting his finger on something which many people, not just in Britain, think looks a little strange, which is this confiscatory level of 75% income tax that François Hollande has promised to introduce in France.
For income over €1 million.
Income over €1 million, yeah. But still, you know, if the income tax man is taking 3/4 of every euro you earn, plus you've got all the other things that aren't involved in that, like the social security contributions and so on, you end up basically taking it all away. Anyway, I think that the real difficulty between Britain and France is not going to be about tax exiles. It's going to be about Europe. David Cameron has got himself cornered, I think, into a position where Britain may be on the slippery slope out of the European Union in the medium to long term. He's under huge pressure to hold a referendum on Britain's terms of membership. He's trying not to make that a straight in or out referendum, but that requires him to try somehow and renegotiate Britain's whole terms of membership with the rest of the European Union, which has got other fish to fry because it's trying desperately to save the euro and make the single currency work. Recipe for disaster.
Christopher Dickey, was it underreported, the fact that François Hollande on that visit said, well, a multi-speed Europe is okay?
I was struck by that. But I guess maybe it was just an admission of what already exists. We already know that there's a Eurozone, there's a non-Eurozone, there's the Brits who are out there floating on the other side of the channel. Not everybody, but a lot of countries are moving at their own speed. And then you've got, even within the Eurozone, you've got these, more or less, these basket cases that in the South, that the Northerners are trying to save. So it's just an admission of reality. But I admit, you don't often hear that from a French president. So.
And we talked about the British press not being too kind to François Hollande on this trip. But what's with the short jokes? True Hollande's handlers will think twice before letting him review the giants of the Queen's Coldstream Guards there at the Foreign Ministry. But did it warrant the Daily Mail on its website delving into a long expose on French leaders' relative heights, including a police lineup? There you see there Napoleon wedged between Sarkozy and Hollande. And in its print edition, showing Hollande standing on tiptoe next to Cameron. Paul Taylor, come on.
You know,
this is below the belt.
Clearly, Nicolas Sarkozy didn't leave him the platform shoes in the shoe cupboard in the Élysée Palace when he left. I think that François Hollande is somebody who seems to me to lack any complex at all about his height or his appearance, and I think that that's very healthy. And
in contrast with Sarkozy.
In contrast with Sarkozy, who was clearly
a deep
acutely
complex about his
absolutely,
height.
absolutely.
Then again, Queen Elizabeth did speak to him in French.
Let me ask you this, Claude Guibal. This is the Daily Telegraph asked its parliamentary sketch writer to look at the body language between the two, and this is what he came up with. He said, "Le Président doesn't exactly come across as the warmest of men. He is a heavy, solemn presence, forbidding like a dark cloud. He doesn't merely stand, he looms. This is an unusual ability for a man of 5 feet 7 inches. He manages to loom even when talking to people who are taller than him." Is that the impression you have of François Hollande?
We're talking about a normal president, remember. That's what it said. Well, size doesn't matter. Does it?
Let's hear it for 5'7" men. Right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that's actually one of the striking things about him is that he has a kind of physical presence, and he doesn't seem to be complexé about his height. Whereas we've had 5 previous years of a president who was deeply complexed about his height, and who didn't loom over anybody, but seemed to be about to bounce off the walls a lot of the time.
It seems that it's the British that have the complex over Hollande's height.
Yeah.
I think it's the British have a complex about France.
Yeah, but you always think about, the shadow of Charles de Gaulle, was 2 meters.
We're in a period, I think probably recessions have something to do with it as well. And in recessions, blaming others and bashing others is always sort of lets off a bit of steam. And, this is...
All right, recession or no recession, as Claude Guibal says, the French leaders are either too tall or too short. That's where we'll have to leave it for now. I want to thank you, Paul Taylor, Claude Guibal, Michael Kirtley, and Christopher Dickey. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's time for business. Matthew Warren will tell us about China's sluggish 7.6% growth.